Coogs house. My voice is mostly back since we've got to break down the TCU game one more time.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate making it your first listen each and every day. If you want to join the conversation, but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. If you take two pieces of cake and you stack them on top of each other, do you now have one piece of cake or two pieces of cake? And does the same rule apply to lasagna? Think about it. Get back to me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. More on that fun later. We got a lot to get into today. I want to talk about a commitment from the 2027 class. Yes, you heard that correctly. A 2027 commitment in the recruiting sphere. I want to talk some about what to use the bye week for Houston Cougar football. But first and foremost, we got to make sure we talk some about the second watch standouts. That means that after a second watch, going back and watch the game over on Sunday, and admittedly it bled over into Monday some, who stood out in this football game. Houston beats TCU 30-19 for Willie Fritz's first Big 12 win, first road win under Coach Fritz as well. What other big things? First Big 12 win of the year, obviously. I don't know. They're 2-0 against teams from the state of Texas, right? Other things you can put on this game. And I think there was a lot to be made out of a lot of performances from this game. I was sick over the weekend, hence no episode on Monday morning. Clearly, I'm still not quite over it. But we're gonna power through it because I'm excited to talk about this one a little bit. The first person I want to talk about some, I think everyone hinted at talking about some as far as standouts in the game. On a second watch, he had a really, really strong game. And that is Devin Williams. Devin Williams, the wide receiver, had 4 targets and 3 catches, including that beautiful touchdown catch back in the end zone for Houston's first touchdown, first points in over 2 weeks of football to that point. Really great hands. I want to stress that he also blocked really well on the perimeter when the ball got out there behind him. Devin Williams did a really good job across the board on Friday night. Impressive performance out of him. Again, he's a guy that transferred in from Tulsa, smaller school guy. Came in with Marquise Shoulders. Sounds like Marquise Shoulders is out for the year, right? And so Devin Williams is kind of putting on for the two of them. Also in this receiver room, Jonah Wilson, I guess, had just 2 targets, just 2 catches, 22 yards. I thought he was seemingly always around the pile of the ball when it got to the perimeter and in a positive way. Really thought Jonah played a pretty strong game as a wideout in a game where there were not a whole lot of balls thrown. Once Houston got the lead, they felt content to run the football, obviously. And run away with the game. We've talked some about Zeon Chriss. Zeon Chriss, we'll talk more about in a minute, gets my locked on player of the week for good reason, I think. We'll talk more about what that means in a second. But honestly, Zeon Chriss is just a welcome sight because he quarterbacked an offense that scored some touchdowns. Zeon had just under 240 total yards and just over 90 of those on the ground. He was 15 of 18 through the air. He had a touchdown passing and a touchdown rushing. Really, really just a solid start from, I think what we kind of forget sometimes is still a young quarterback. And it's interesting that he got the nod and kind of ran with it in this one, no pun intended. Because I think the intention really was before he has a great first series to let the guys alternate, much like they had against Iowa State, until someone got some rhythm. And he just opened with that rhythm and never let go of it. I'd be remiss to not point out, as I did in the reaction show on Friday night, that it took a lot of stones to do what Donovan Smith did to come in and lead the drive to ice the game at the end after having sat and watched your job get taken away throughout the game. And I don't want to overlook that, but Zeon Chriss took that job. That job is now Zeon Chris's. That shouldn't be up for debate for a while, at least. And what's crazy is it didn't take like crazy play. It took solid, smart decisions, didn't play outside of himself. Yes, he had one gigantic run. He hit 21 and a half miles per hour. I think that was the number on the 71 yard touchdown. But on the whole, right, Zeon had a very measured game, a very calm game. He was just better than competent at that point, right? And I mentioned he got the locked on player of the week this week. Houston has a bye week, and I do get a player of the week to nominate for next week as well. And so I'm probably going to nominate my defensive player of the game from this week, which would have been AJ Haulcy. He may just get the nod for me next week just because I want to make sure I recognize his efforts too. He was defensive player of the week in the Big 12 this week. Only targeted 4 times as a safety. It's pretty impressive for how much TCU likes to pass the football. Allowed just 1 catch in those 4 times, had 2 picks. If you're keeping track at home, that means when you throw it to AJ Haulcy, there's a greater chance that he catches the ball than your guy if you're TCU. He also had a couple solo tackles, had a half tackle in the run game. Really impressive stat line and just analytical coverage. I mean, he had great read on the field all night on Friday. Always delivers punching blows, really intimidating tackler. And so you want to make sure that you reward those guys on the back half. Can't forget about the big guys up front like Keith Cooper. Keith had just a couple of tackles, lots of pressure. And really, I think what's interesting about watching Keith Cooper play against TCU and these teams that are getting more film on him is his impact is not coming statistically as much as it is the way offenses are adjusting to block and line up with him. Cooper's demanding double teams as an edge guy. That's pretty impressive because he's pulling in guards out to get him, which helps free up inside guys. Seeing Carlos Allen make a lot more tackles. Well, that's them. It's A, Carlos is making the play, but B, that's because they've adjusted to try and cover up Keith Cooper, right? Oh, they slide over and Alton AJ Holmes has a couple as well. Well, they've slid the whole thing over to try and make sure they cover up Keith Cooper. Keith Cooper's one-on-one dominance, something that's making teams change what they do in a way that it's not that it's unsound, it's that it leaves other cracks because nothing is foolproof. And other guys getting to take advantage. The defense is great all the way around. I mean, Brandon Mack had a great game as well. But Keith Cooper really is like the secret ingredient or that I don't know what cooking metaphor it is besides the secret ingredient, but like the thing that you stir with the stirring rod. He's important to what they're doing, is what I'm trying to say. And he's really got this defensive front seven churning. Obviously, Michael Batten had a great night, a handful of tackles as always. I thought Jamal Morris played well. Kendrick Gant came in and played well as well in his more limited time. But Haulcy and Cooper, those two guys look like they could be playing on Sundays, certainly after the way they played last Friday. I want to take a second to talk some about using the bye week because they played last Friday, kind of had an extra day on their bye week, and what Houston can look to build off of in this bye week. Before we get too far, I mentioned that Zeon Chriss was my player of the week because we're going to be giving away one of those every week. We're going to give away a Roy Player of the Week. The Roy app lets you directly support your favorite athletes. Unlike collectives, where you make a donation to a general fund, Roy lets you choose specific athlete you want to support. You back the players you care about, and in return, you get exclusive content after the season, like personal videos and updates and more. The best part, it's all risk-free. The athlete transfers or doesn't create the content, you get your money back. This week, we chose Zeon Chriss as the Locked On Coogs Player of the Week for leading a competent offense, scoring some touchdowns, and frankly, instilling a lot more optimism in the program while doing it. So that means that I contribute $100 to this campaign on Roy, and I want you to join me by making a payment as well for as little as $10 to Zeon Chriss or other Coogs as well. When enough of us contribute, it's not just about the dollars, it's about the message we want to send to Zeon or other Coogs. Our collective support can help keep them connected to our school. Plus, Roy's doing their part to bring fans closer to their schools and athletes with an exciting giveaway. Roy is giving one lucky fan 2 tickets to any game of their choice in November. Here's how you enter. Just download the Roy app in the App Store or Google Play. Use code LOCKED ON when signing up, and you're entered. If you're already on Roy, make a payment to any athlete's campaign, and you'll also be automatically entered. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Join Roy.com for official rules. Go to Roy and try it out. There's no subscription, no recurring fees, and for just as little as $10, you can get in the NIL game. Roy, support players, change the game. Locked on Coogs, Parker Rangers here, and the Houston Cougars are coming off of a big win over TCU, heading into a bye week, and then a weird week as they travel to Kansas City to play the Kansas Jayhawks, notably from Lawrence, Kansas, in Arrowhead Stadium. Now, the game is being played in Arrowhead as technically a Kansas home game, but Kansas is not having any real home games this year. And frankly, TCU beat Kansas. Kansas looks the kind of team that Houston can beat this year. I might not have said that about Kansas early in the year. I might have said it was more challenging before the year started, but Kansas had a rough go of it as of late, has yet to beat an FBS team. And so Houston played on Friday night. They get an extra day on their bye week, and then goes into the Kansas week. And I see this 2-week window as a chance to do a handful of things for Houston. One, we know they got a couple guys that really need to get healthy. Zeon Chriss, quarterback, started the game, was not able to finish the game against TCU. So we were hearing about some sort of a shoulder, or they were working on his forearm, it looked like, from the TV angle. Whatever the case may be, he's got some time. It's time to get that arm right. You spend some time getting that healthy. Joseph Manjack missed Iowa State with a shoulder injury. People were worried about what that meant, and he came back and played some in the TCU game, but did not play a lot like Joseph Manjack we know and love. So very much in the same kind of vein, he needs to make sure he's healing up that shoulder, taking time to get healthy, getting himself worked out. We got, again, a while to get that work done. Let's make sure we take care of the guys as much as we can in this week. I think that's going to be the number one goal. Right now, you're coming off of a game. You feel pretty good. Feel like you figured some things out about yourself in a positive way. You know your defense is good. Focus on getting healthy. Parker Jenkins, whatever's been wrong with him, whatever's been bothering him. And I fully also know that guys like Rashawn and guys like Stacy have just played well. And so it's not just that Jenkins is like not getting his touches or whatever. Like, those guys are also playing well. But if Jenkins is dinged up from the Oklahoma game, go get that taken care of. Jamarian Burnett missed a couple of games. I know he took 12 carries against TCU, which were kind of tough carries. Still need to take care of that body, man, especially for a young running back. Get in there. Take care of yourself. A lot of those guys, big lineman types. We saw, I think, Demetrius Hunter got poked in the eye on Friday. We've had different guys cramping at different times and things like that. Hopefully the heat breaks on some of that. But also, it's just another chance to get their bodies right. The other thing I was going to say, as far as things to get right in the bye week and how to use this bye, is it feels like that, like I said at the opening, that the quarterback decision has been made for this football team. Zeon Chriss should be the starter the rest of the way. He offers a true dual threat. He had some zip in his step as he ran. He's a glider, but as we saw in the graphic that's now gone viral, he hit over 21 miles per hour on that 71-yard run as well. He does a lot of things very well. I would also argue, and this is This is not journalism. This is me, the fan, pointing things out. Zeon Chriss had a Tulane offer out of high school. Zeon Chriss went to Louisiana. Then you have Willie Fritz come from Tulane to Houston. And even with Donovan Smith as a starting quarterback here in waiting, Willie Fritz goes out and gets Zeon and says, come with me to the Big 12. Right? I have a feeling, this is a total gut feeling, that Willie wants it to be Zeon too. Total gut feeling. But Zeon got all the first team reps in the spring because of Donovan's injury. And then they kind of split time to start the year. And, Donovan got a lot more. He got a handful of series, and then Zeon's going to get a series in the UNLV game. Zeon got dinged up in that game, so he didn't get to play against Oklahoma. He's kind of worked his way back from that. What is this? Just half the season in, it's Zeon's job to lose at this point. I think that all clicks. I think that that's kind of been the writing on the wall. And from what I will say is that Zeon's performance against TCU warrants it. He played the part. And now it's time to make sure we have an offense that complements his skill set. We talked last week with Martin Marquin, and he was on the scouting staff when they brought in Donnie, when they brought in Uiale, and frankly has watched a lot of Zeon tape as well, and was saying, that honestly, the biggest deal is the three guys have very different skill sets, and one offense would not suit all three. They each kind of need their own things. Well, you can't rip up a playbook and start over on a bye week, but you can fine tune some things, then specifics now that you've got Zeon. If you're going to be more of a zone read with threat to pull, you can tag some nows and stuff on the backside of that, right? If you know that Zeon's good at working the sidelines and has a big arm, a big potential arm strength, right? You can have, things that get Boogie in space deep and take the top off. Jonah Wilson goes over the top as well as anyone, right? You can kind of, fine tune some of those smaller things that you had somewhere in the playbook as well. It's not adding a whole bunch, but just make sure you got them exactly fitted, form fitted, if you will, to the guys you got in the roster now, because you feel like you've got a good decision there, right? You don't have to have things that fit multiple guys, and you don't really have to worry about spending practice reps and time on guys that aren't going to get to play as much, because you've kind of, again, made your decision there. Doesn't mean you can't throw everything out, as we saw at the end of the TCU game. Donnie's going to be able to come in and win the game with a series. I'm sure Owe could do the same as well. But you've got to spend most of your time on what you're going to spend most of your time in the game on. That's the way that the things go. So in high school football, when I was coaching, again, I was a high school run game coordinator for 9 years. You don't get a whole lot of bye weeks to work with. The occasional week here or there, it's not a whole lot. But what you spend those weeks doing is they kind of turn into camp weeks. You work on things. And so my assumption would be that, obviously Division I level is a whole different thing. Big 12 level is a whole different thing. But that with the same, at least mental reps aspect of a campy week where you can focus on yourself, they're focused on offense that Chris can be a part of. The defense is strong. It doesn't have, not that it doesn't have anything to fix, but that the offense would have some way to focus on things that Chris does well. Again, Chris does have a strong arm. Chris is elusive. There's got to be some way to continue to work on what they've got to fit how he does those things. All right, I'm trying not to cough too much into the microphone, but before we get too far into the fun, I do want to remind you about our buddies over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now NFL fans can start the season with a big return. When you get into the middle of a game, you get a hunch, you check the latest stats, and view all kinds of live play-by-play and so much more from the same website, same app that you are placing your bets on. You can start with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. You place your first $5 bet. Now, it's nice and easy weekend this week without any Cougs football, but if you're going to go make other games more interesting, feel free to go do it at fanduel.com. Parker Answer here, locked on Cougs, wrapping up the TCU win and moving into the bye week. And TCU was a big win over the weekend. I don't act like it was not a big win. It was not the only big win for the Houston Cougar football. Willie Fritz and the Houston Cougar football staff got their first 2027 commit, 2027. That is current, I guess, just got to be sophomores. I was about to say rising, but they just got to be sophomores in high school. Wide receiver from Iowa Colony in Alvin, Texas, named Aden Starling. Aden 6'1", $180. He already had offers from Arizona State, Baylor, and South Carolina, and he chose Houston. Houston becomes one of, at the stats right here, 4 Power 4 schools with a 2027 commit. I should point out Alabama is one of them. They have 2. But it's still pretty darn strong. Getting started early on those early classes, as we see Willie Fritz do. Now, I'm reading some stuff here to try and learn more about the young man, but I have to say, first of all, it sounds like he only had the offer for a couple weeks before committing. Cited the family-like environment that Fritz creates. I think that means that the sales pitch worked, folks, that the culture, family atmosphere, all those different vibesy kinds of things worked in recruiting 2027's Aden Starling. He also said, and full disclosure, I think this is the perk of KeiSean committing early, but Aden Starling cited 2026 top athlete in America, number 1 player in Texas commit, KeiSean Henderson's commitment to the University of Houston as a reason that he would be coming. KeiSean's committed to Houston and has frankly turned down more blue bloody programs to do so as the number 1 player in Texas in his class 2026 because he wants to play quarterback. And Houston said, we think you can play quarterback here. And he's also from Houston and he wants to play in Houston and so on. Those are all factors. But Starling's pointing out, like, hey, if we can all do what KeiSean's doing and stay in Houston, the best talent from Houston stays in Houston, why can't we go win everything? And to be fair, if you look at rosters across college football, the folks in Miami, well, Cam Ward, where's he from, right? You go to Alabama, you go to Ole Miss, you go to Texas, you go to wherever, Ohio State. Yeah, where are those guys from, right? And it doesn't have to be that you get every single one. It'd be great to get everybody, right? But if you get the right few, KeiSean Henderson, Aden Starling, Zeon Taylor, Mo Williams, guys that are there on campus right now, like, so you can start to turn this thing around very, very quickly. I also think it's worth pointing out that no 2025 6-7 recruit is necessarily upset about wins and losses in the present tense. That's not to say that they're not frustrating, but I think a lot of people's fear with the rebuild is that, oh man, when you lose a bunch of games, what's that going to tell recruits? And I don't mean to get into the mind of every athlete, and every athlete is different. But part of what makes Aden Starling a high-end 2027 recruit, or KeiSean Henderson a high-end 2026 recruit, or Austin Carlisle a high-end 2025 recruit is they're confident that they're good enough to turn it around on their own. So they may see results and be like, man, they're not very good this year. And in their head, it doesn't matter because they're going to be good once they're on campus. They want to come play with the fans, the facilities, the city on their chest, all of those things. Play in the Big 12. It's not about whether or not the 2024 team was good. 2024 team was before they got there. And if you're the dude, as we see with a lot of the attitude and like confidence and often deserved confidence. I mean, don't mean to call it like bravado or arrogance. It's confidence because it's earned. It's part of the fix is that they come and they show up and they play well. They put in the work, they develop. And so I think that the commitment signaled that to me again. And it's nice to see that thing kind of reaffirmed. We'll probably say that whenever it gets reaffirmed throughout the recruiting cycle, however often it seems to come up. Exciting weekend for the Coogs in football. It is a bye week, so a little bit less in terms of storylines this week. Still got some more in the House settlement coming out. I got to siphon through some of that. We'll see how that impacts Houston. Potential big basketball news on the horizon as well. Basketball season is coming up. All kinds of fun stuff with that. Whatever you need, as long as I'm healthy enough to do it. I'm barely healthy enough to do it today, but I pushed through it, promise. Locked On Coogs is here to help you out with it. Locked On Coogs is proud of Locked On Podcast. I mean, it's your team every day that I'm healthy enough to do it. Go Coogs.